Hi stamping and crafting friends. Welcome to Melissa's Crafting Treehouse. Today I've got a simple project for you that features the Elegantly Said bundle, which includes a stamp set and the Elegant Tag Punch. I'll also be featuring the Simply Elegant Specialty Designer Series paper and the new and amazing metallic specialty paper. I absolutely love this specialty paper. I literally gasped when I first saw it. This was my first and original design of the card. But this design works really well with lots of the different patterns in this designer paper pack. The pile you see here were my cards for the Maui Incentive Trip Achievers Swap. This is also one of my club and free card kit projects, so you can get the pieces and parts to make this project with a qualifying order. For details about my free card kit program, make sure to check out the link in the video description below. Now this card was pretty quick and easy to put together, but there are some little details that made it just a little bit time consuming. For the thank you sentiment, I used my Gilded Leafing, and the background piece is dry embossed and then of course punched out. So I'm just getting started with my basic assembly. I've got my Designer Series paper panel, which I'm going to go ahead and attach to a piece of basic black cardstock. Now this particular piece of Designer Series paper includes gold, silver, and copper elements. That is not necessarily the case for the other patterns of this Designer Series paper. There are essentially 12 patterns in this designer paper pack. Half of them have metallic elements to them, and all of them have some bit of gold in them. And because of that, I was able to use my gold specialty metallic paper to make 5 different variations of my card using 5 of the different patterns. So here I'm just putting a little bit of multi-purpose liquid glue on the back of each of my metallic specialty strips, and I'm just going to line them up on the sides of my card, leaving about 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch of an edge. You can leave as much or little black as you want. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I just adore this metallic specialty paper, and it comes in 2 colors, the gold and the rose gold. As you can see, it has a beautiful texture and shimmer to it. There are some natural irregularities in this paper as well, so just keep that in mind when you get it. If it looks slightly less than perfect, never fear, that's actually how it's supposed to be. Now, depending on how you turn your metallic paper, it might look slightly different, a little bit more copper or a little bit more gold, depending on the angle. But again, that's just part of the natural look of this gorgeous paper. And now I'm just attaching my designer paper panel with its black backing to the front of my card. It's going to cover up just a little bit of the metallic specialty paper, and that's what it's supposed to be. Now, my pieces were slightly off in length, so I'm just coming in and trimming off a little bit off the bottom. And then I'm just going to put my white inside panel on the inside of the card. And now we're ready to get started with creating the sentiment element. I've got a small square of basic black cardstock, and I'm going to start by taking my spritzer bottle with water, and off camera I'm just going to spray that piece lightly. That just allows us to be able to get a deeper impression in the cardstock. And I'm just sandwiching my cardstock in the Tasteful Textile embossing folder. This is a 3D embossing folder, so I'm using my blue plate over the top and then just running it through my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. And now I'm just going to punch out my tag with the Elegant Tag Punch. And it's got this lovely texture of the Tasteful Textile embossing folder. Now I need a circle to put on top of my tag. The circle is the piece that I'm going to be stamping my sentiment on, and you can use your layering circles dies or a punch that you have on hand. The circle I used measured about 1 1/4 inch in diameter. Now I'm going to start by using my anti-static pouch and rubbing it over the surface of the circle because I'm getting ready to do my gilded leafing sentiment piece. And I'm pulling in my heat tool, my Versamark, my heat and stick powder, and of course the Gilded Leafing. Now to get ready, I like to actually heat up my heat tool just a bit so that it's nice and hot when I go and use it. So I'm just going to do that off camera. And I like to open my box of Gilded Leafing so that it's ready for me when I'm ready to use it. Now I'm leaving the lid on top of it because the Gilded Leafing has the tendency to sort of fly away. It's very lightweight, and the slightest puff of air will make the flakes sort of float up onto your work surface. So you definitely want to make sure you don't blow the heat tool into it or blow into it with your own breath or sneeze or cough. Here's my dear sweet friend Roseanne finding that out the hard way. Now for my sentiment, I'll be using the thank you image from the Elegantly Said stamp set, and I'm just going to ink it up with my Versamark and stamp right on my circle. Next, I'm going to put it into my heat and stick powder, and the heat and stick powder is a little bit different from embossing powder. It's essentially a powdered glue. Now for some reason I don't think the heat and stick powder sticks to the Versamark quite as much as embossing powder. So when I put it into my powder, instead of turning it over and vigorously tapping it really hard with the back of my finger, I tap it gently so too many of the specks of heat and stick powder don't come off the image, leaving some blank spots in my image. So I'm going to use a tool to hold down my sentiment so it doesn't move when I'm heating it. And with my heat tool, I'm going to go ahead and heat this image. Now it's very important that you don't overheat it because the glue will sort of lose its stick if you do that. So when you do it, just make sure you heat it only until the powder just disappears. Just like that. Now I'm just going to take my piece, very judiciously open up the lid of my Gilded Leafing, and just press my piece down into the Gilded Leafing. Now if I did a good job of not overheating my sentiment and the heat and stick powder, I'll get a nice solid image for my sentiment. I'm using a sponge just to rub off the excess Gilded Leafing. And you can actually be pretty aggressive with pressing on to the image to help remove any excess to make sure that you get as crisp an image left as possible. Now if you look closely at my sentiment piece, you'll see that there was one part of the K that either was overheated or didn't get any Gilded Leafing on it, or maybe it just didn't even have heat and stick powder on it when I melted it. So the image didn't turn out as well as I liked. So I just grabbed another black circle and I'm going to stamp it again with Versamark and go through the process again. So now I'm just putting it into my heat and stick powder again, tapping it off ever so slightly, removing any specks that might be on the surface where they don't belong. And then I'm going to go ahead and heat it again. You can see I have a few little specks at the bottom that I'm using my paper piercing tool to remove ever so carefully. And this time I'm checking to make sure that the image is fully covered with the heat and stick powder, just to make sure that was not the problem the first time around. Now as an alternative to using the Gilded Leafing, you could also use gold embossing powder for this. They both work beautifully, and the Gilded Leafing is a little bit more work, but it's a much shinier, brilliant gold than the gold embossing, and so I prefer it for that reason. So there are my two sentiment pieces, the one on the left without the complete image and the one on the right with a more complete image. So now I'm ready to assemble my sentiment piece. So I'm going to start by putting dimensionals on the back side of my circle, and then I'm going to go ahead and attach that to my punched piece. I'm going to justify that circle slightly down from the top to leave room above it for my small piece of ribbon. Now the ribbon I'm using here is 1/4 inch wide gold shimmer ribbon. You could also use the gray granite shimmer ribbon as an alternative, since there are silver elements in this designer paper as well. So I'm just tying a small knot in my ribbon. I'm going to snip off the ends at an angle. After I've cut off the ends, I'm going to hold on to the knot and hold the tails and sort of pull them down and into shape and make sure that the tails are the same length and adjust accordingly. And then I'm going to use my paper piercing tool to roll up a glue dot, put it on the back side of my knot, and just attach it to the top of my tag. To attach my tag, I'm going to use my multi-purpose liquid glue. I prefer this particular method for attaching, especially since the piece is dry embossed, and if I press onto it with a tape runner, it'll flatten out some of that texture. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've made multiple versions of this card, and for the two that I'm going to show you in just a second, you'll see that the spacing is slightly different between the two. For the card I just finished, I'm showing more of the gold specialty paper, and the strips of black are slightly thinner, so that's one difference. And then also for the gold specialty paper on the right, the striations are vertical, and for the one on the left, the striations are horizontal. As a reminder, this is a club and free card kit project. To get free card kits, all you have to do is place a qualifying order in my online store. Plus, first-time customers get all 3 kits regardless of the order size. To learn more about how you can get free card kits, check out the link in the video description below. I hope you enjoyed my project today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and happy crafting!